The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets over the city's forgotten edges, blanketing the cracked sidewalks of the industrial district in a deceptive hush. Christmas Eve lights flickered from distant high-rises, their warm glow mocking the chill that seeped through every uninsulated wall. Here, in the shadow of abandoned warehouses along the frozen river, the holiday was just another night of survival. The air carried the sharp tang of diesel from idling trucks and the faint metallic bite of the water below, where ice chunks bobbed like forgotten promises. Vincent Russo hunched against the wind, his overcoat, once a symbol of unassailable power, now sodden and heavy. At 42, the man who commanded Chicago's shadowed empires felt the weight of isolation like never before. His convoy had vanished hours ago, swallowed by a betrayal he hadn't seen coming. A rival family's ambush on the highway. A tip-off from within his own ranks. His burner phone lay shattered in the gutter, and the safe house coordinates he'd memorized led only to this desolate stretch. No guards, no drivers, just the howl of the wind and the distant wail of a siren. Christmas, he thought bitterly. A time for family reunions and quiet betrayals. He was alone, exposed, the king stripped of his crown. He slipped into an alley behind a row of derelict tenements, the kind where heat came from space heaters jury-rigged to extension cords snaking like veins through the walls. The smell of damp concrete and overcooked cabbage hung in the air, mingling with the pine scent from a lone, sagging Christmas tree propped against a fire escape. Vincent's breath fogged the night, his gloved hand instinctively reaching for the concealed pistol at his waist. Paranoia was his oldest ally, but tonight it whispered of worse fates, rival enforcers closing in, or the cops tipped off by that same internal snake. A muffled cry pierced the quiet, sharp and desperate, coming from a nearby stairwell. Vincent froze, his instincts warring between flight and curiosity. In his world, cries were preludes to traps, but this one carried the raw edge of genuine fear, a child's voice, high and pleading. He edged closer, boots crunching softly on the fresh snow, until he could peer through the rusted chain-link fence separating the alley from the building's side entrance. There, under the weak amber glow of a single bulb, a woman knelt in the snow-dusted stairwell. She was in her late 20s, her threadbare coat pulled tight around a frame worn thin by hardship. Dark hair escaped a knit cap, framing a face etched with exhaustion and resolve. In her arms, a boy no older than 5 shivered, his small body racked with coughs that echoed like accusations against the cold. The woman, Elena Vasquez, though Vincent didn't know her name yet, pressed a threadbare blanket around him, her lips moving in hurried Spanish prayers mixed with English reassurances. "Shh, mi amor, it's okay. Mama's here." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she rummaged in a battered backpack. No heat in their apartment upstairs, the landlord's final eviction notice taped to the door like a holiday card from hell. The power had cut out hours ago, and little Marco's fever was climbing, his skin hot to the touch despite the biting cold. The free clinic was miles away. Buses stopped for the night, and her shift at the diner wouldn't cover even a cab. Desperation clawed at her. She'd pawned her wedding ring last week, but medicine required cash up front. Vincent watched, transfixed, as she pulled out a small vial. Stolen antibiotics from a neighbor's discard pile, a risky gamble in a city where trust was currency. But it wasn't enough. Marco's cough deepened, wet and ominous, and Elena's eyes darted to the river's edge, where the warehouses loomed like silent judges. She stood, hoisting the boy onto her hip, and began the descent toward the water's path, her steps purposeful despite the slipperiness. He should have walked away. In his line of work, involvement was a liability, a thread that could unravel everything. But something in her unyielding grip on the child, the way she defied the storm for him, stirred a fracture in Vincent's armored heart. His own son, taken by a rival's bullet years ago, had cried like that once, helpless, trusting. The memory surged, unbidden, and he found himself moving, shadowing her from the alley's mouth. The riverbank was a treacherous ribbon of ice and sludge, sodium lamps casting long shadows that danced with the falling snow. Elena trudged along, Marco's head lolling against her shoulder, his whimpers fading into ragged breaths. She spotted a flickering light from an old boathouse, perhaps a homeless camp or squatters with a fire. Anything for warmth, for a chance to get him stable until morning. The wind whipped up, carrying the low rumble of an approaching engine, distant but gaining. Vincent tensed. In his world, engines at night meant trouble. As Elena neared the boathouse, her foot caught on a hidden root beneath the snow. She stumbled, the backpack spilling its meager contents, cans of soup, a half-empty water bottle, the vial rolling toward the water's edge. Marco slipped from her grasp, tumbling into the shallow, icy fringe where the river met the bank. The cold shock hit him like a slap, his cry piercing the night as the current tugged at his tiny form. "No!" Elena lunged, splashing into the frigid water up to her knees, her hands grasping desperately. But the boy was drifting, the ice cracking under his weight. Vincent's pulse thundered. He could wait no longer. Bursting from the shadows, he sprinted forward, coat flapping like dark wings. "Hold on!" His voice cut through the gale, rough with command. He plunged in beside her, the river's bite numbing his legs instantly. Grabbing Marco's collar with one gloved hand, he hauled the boy back, thrusting him into Elena's arms. She clutched her son, tears freezing on her cheeks, staring up at the stranger with wide, wary eyes. Water dripped from his sleeves, but Vincent's gaze locked on hers, fierce, assessing. "Who are you?" she whispered, backing away slightly, Marco's coughs punctuating the silence. "Someone who knows a fighter when he sees one," he replied, his tone low, edged with the gravel of too many secrets. The engine's rumble grew louder now, headlights piercing the snow like accusatory fingers. Was it his pursuers or hers? And why, in this moment of chaos, did saving them feel like reclaiming a piece of his own lost soul? As the vehicle rounded the bend, its beam sweeping the riverbank, Vincent pulled Elena and the boy toward the boathouse's cover. But in the glare, he glimpsed a familiar insignia on the car's door, a serpent coiled around a dagger, his rival's, and now they'd seen him. The boathouse door creaked open under Vincent's shove, a splintered relic of weathered pine that groaned like a warning. Inside, the air hung thick with the musty scent of mildew and old motor oil, the floor a mosaic of warped planks slick with river damp. Dim light filtered through cracks in the walls, illuminating stacks of forgotten crates and a rusted rowboat half sunk in the shadows. Elena clutched Marco tighter, her heart hammering as she backed into the gloom, the boy's wet clothes soaking through her coat. The feverish heat from his body clashed with the chill seeping from every corner, his coughs echoing off the low ceiling like muffled gunshots. Vincent barred the door with a nearby oar, his movements precise, born of years navigating worse than this. The engine outside idled now, tires crunching on the gravelly bank, voices murmuring low, 2, maybe 3 men, their words lost to the wind but laced with urgency. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling silence, and crouched beside her. Up close, Elena could see the lines etched deep around his eyes, the faint scar tracing his jawline like a map of old battles. He wasn't some random Samaritan. His presence carried weight, the kind that made the air feel heavier. "Stay low," he whispered, his voice a controlled rumble. "They're not here for carols." Elena's mind raced. Who was this man who'd materialized from the storm like a ghost? Gratitude warred with suspicion. She'd learned the hard way that help in this city always came with strings. Marco whimpered, burying his face in her neck, and she rocked him gently, her free hand fumbling for the backpack's spilled contents. The vial of antibiotics lay just outside, glinting mockingly in the headlights' sweep through the door's gap. She couldn't lose it. It was all they had. The voices sharpened outside. "Tracks lead here, Fresh. Rousseau's coat, you said? One man's tone dripped with eagerness, the other a grunt of affirmation. Vincent's jaw tightened. They knew his name. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd feared. Someone in his inner circle had sold his route, his habits. No coincidence on Christmas Eve, when guards were lax, families pulling double shifts for holiday pay. He scanned the boathouse. A small window high on the far wall, boarded but loose. An interior door to what might be a storage room, leading perhaps to the river's underbelly tunnels. Elena caught his glance toward the window. "We can't run in this," she hissed, nodding at Marco. "He's burning up. We need to get him warm, dry, somewhere safe." Vincent met her eyes, seeing the steel beneath the fear. She wasn't crumbling. She was calculating, like him. "Safe's relative tonight, but I know a place. Trust me for 5 minutes?" She hesitated, the weight of a lifetime's caution pressing down. Trusting strangers had cost her before. Her ex, vanishing with their savings, leaving her to scrape by in this frozen hell. But the alternatives were worse. Rivals closing in. Her son collateral in a war she didn't understand. "Fine, but if you screw us, I'll make you regret it." A faint smile ghosted his lips, the first crack in his facade. Noted. He moved to the interior door, easing it open to reveal a narrow passage, dank and echoing with the river's distant lap. Old smuggler's route, he recalled. His family had used these veins under the city decades ago for liquor runs, now forgotten by all but the desperate. The air grew colder, laced with the briny tang of standing water, but it offered cover. Outside, boots thudded closer, a flashlight beam stabbing through the cracks. "Check the boat. Might be hiding." Vincent grabbed Elena's arm, guiding her into the tunnel. She followed, Marco's small form a lead weight against her, his breath shallow and labored. The passage twisted, walls slick with condensation, the only light from Vincent's phone. A burner he'd stashed in his boot, its glow casting eerie shadows on graffiti-scarred concrete. They moved in silence, the sounds of the boathouse fading behind them. A crash of splintering wood, curses as the men found the empty space. 50 yards in, the tunnel opened to a service ladder climbing to street level, emerging near a derelict pier. Vincent paused at the base, listening. No engines now, but the snow muffled everything, turning the night into a white void. He climbed first, scouting, then motioned her up. Elena struggled with Marco, her arms aching, but she gritted her teeth and ascended, the metal rungs icy under her gloves. At the top, a manhole cover grated open to a side street, flanked by shuttered loading docks and the hulking silhouette of a shuttered cannery. The wind howled freer here, carrying the faint jingle of distant bells. Some church marking midnight mass. Vincent helped her out, scanning the shadows. No tails visible, but he knew better. His world was riddled with eyes. Street cams jury-rigged by his own tech guys, now possibly flipped. "My car's 2 blocks over, stashed before the ambush. We get there. I can get you both to a doctor." Elena shifted Marco, his eyes fluttering half open, glassy with fever. "Why us? You don't even know me." He glanced back at the river, where faint shouts still echoed. "Saw you fighting for him back there. Reminded me of someone I couldn't save." The words hung, raw and unpolished, a glimpse into the man behind the coat. His son, gone 5 years now, a hit meant for him, had been that age, that vulnerable. Witnessing Elena's defiance had cracked something open, a debt he couldn't ignore. But more than that, in her eyes, he saw a mirror. Survival stripped to its bones, no room for weakness. She studied him, the sodium lamps painting his face in stark contrasts. Possessiveness flickered in his gaze, not the crude kind, but a fierce protectiveness, like claiming a found treasure in a sea of loss. It unnerved her. She'd built walls for a reason, independence her only shield. Yet here she was, tethered to this stranger by circumstance. This place, it's not some trap. Cleaner than this alley, that's for damn sure. He started walking, keeping to the building edges, his hand hovering near her elbow without touching, respecting the boundary for now. The street was empty, snow piling on abandoned shopping carts, a discarded Santa hat fluttering like a flag of surrender. But as they turned the corner, Vincent spotted it. A sleek black SUV idling under a flickering streetlight, its plate half obscured by frost. His ride, untouched. Relief surged, but so did caution. Who'd left it running? Elena slid into the back with Marco as Vincent took the wheel, the engine purring to life with a low growl. Heat blasted from the vents, a luxury that made Marco sigh in his sleep. As they pulled away, Vincent checked the mirrors. Nothing immediate, but a distant pair of headlights flickered on, trailing at a careful distance. Coincidence? Or had the snake in his ranks fed coordinates to the serpents? He accelerated smoothly, weaving toward the city's edge, where his secondary safe house waited in a nondescript brownstone masked as a storage unit. Elena watched the side mirror, her hand stroking Marco's hair. Those men. Who were they after? You, Vincent said, his tone light but eyes serious. Or at least now they think so. It was half true. Saving her had painted a target on them all. But as the snow blurred the pursuing lights, he wondered, was this pull toward her a weakness, or the first real loyalty he'd felt in years? And how long before the betrayal circle closed, dragging her into his storm? The SUV cut through the snow-choked streets like a shadow slipping between giants, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the stormy sky. Christmas lights strung across overpasses blinked erratically, their red and green hues smearing into bloody streaks on the windshield as wipers slapped rhythmically. Inside, the heater hummed a low symphony, thawing the chill from Elena's bones while Marco stirred fitfully in her lap, his coughs now softer, but no less insistent. The leather seats creaked under Vincent's grip on the wheel, his eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror every few seconds, tracking the phantom headlights that had vanished 2 turns back. Or had they? Paranoia was a second skin for him, woven from years of watching allies turn to vipers. Elena pressed her palm to Marco's forehead, the fever still raging like a hidden fire. The antibiotics vial, retrieved in a desperate snatch from the riverbank before their tunnel dash, now rested in her pocket, its label peeling like old promises. She glanced at Vincent's profile, illuminated by the dashboard glow. Strong jaw set, a faint stubble shadowing his chin. He drove with the precision of someone who'd evaded worse than a winter squall, but the tension in his shoulders spoke of deeper currents. "This safe house," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "What makes it safe? From men who know your name?" Vincent's gaze stayed forward, navigating a pothole that jarred the vehicle. Steel doors, cameras on every angle, off-grid power. My people built it for nights like this, when the family's code gets tested. He paused, the word family hanging heavy, laced with the bitterness of loss. His code, protect the innocent, never let a child pay for a father's sins. It had shielded him once, but tonight, witnessing Elena's raw fight for Marco had reignited it, a flame he'd thought extinguished with his son's grave. Those serpents back there? Rivals from the east side. They hit my convoy, scattered my men. But you and the boy, you're not part of that. Not yet. Not yet, she echoed, her voice edged with defiance. Autonomy was her armor, forged in the ruins of a marriage that left her scraping diner tips for rent. Accepting his help felt like handing over a piece of herself, but Marco's labored breaths left no room for pride. The city blurred past, a hospital's emergency lights flashing like false hope, docks where cranes loomed skeletal under sodium lamps, their chains clinking in the wind like distant warnings. The smell of exhaust seeped through the vents, mixing with the faint, comforting pine of a forgotten air freshener. They turned onto a narrow side street in Pilsen, where brownstones huddled like conspirators, their facades cracked but unyielding. Vincent killed the engine 2 blocks early, scanning for tells, a loitering shadow, an idling car with mismatched plates. Nothing stirred but the snow, piling on fire escapes and muffling the faint hum of a generator from a nearby bodega. "Wait here," he murmured, slipping out into the night. His boots crunched softly as he approached on foot, circling the Target building, a nondescript 3-story with boarded windows and a side alley reeking of garbage bins overflowing with holiday trash. He punched a code into a hidden keypad by the service door. 12/25/14, the date his son was born, twisted into a lock only he knew. The door buzzed open, and Vincent waved her over. Elena gathered Marco, bundling him tighter, and dashed through the flurry, the cold nipping at her heels. Inside, the space unfolded into a stark contrast. Clean lines, exposed brick walls warmed by recessed lighting, a kitchenette stocked with canned goods and a medical kit that rivaled a clinic's. No ostentatious luxury, just efficient sanctuary, the kind built by men who planned for wars in whispers. He locked the door behind them, the deadbolts thudding like final judgments, and flipped a switch that hummed to life, revealing a wall of monitors flickering with feeds from hidden cams. The street empty, alley clear, but one angle caught a flicker, a delivery van idling too long at the corner. Elena settled Marco on a cot in the corner, the room's air carrying a faint antiseptic tang. She dosed him with the antibiotics, her hands steady despite the adrenaline crash, then rummaged for dry clothes from a stocked drawer, oversized sweats that swallowed his small frame. Vincent watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his possessiveness a quiet storm. She was no damsel. Her movements were deliberate, a mother's code mirroring his own. But drawing her in meant risk, exposing her to the ledgers of debts and the rotations of guards that defined his empire. "You said rivals," she pressed, as Marco drifted into uneasy sleep. "Why Christmas? And why help us drag you down?" He poured 2 mugs of coffee from a percolator, the rich aroma cutting the sterile air, and handed her one. Steam curled like secrets. Holidays when people slip, guards home with kids, informants thinking no one's watching. My second Tommy handles the books. He swore the convoy was clean, but that van outside. He nodded to the monitor where the vehicle now crept closer, its driver obscured by tint. A subtle tell. The plate ended in 47, Tommy's lucky number, etched into every manifest Vincent had signed. Betrayal confirmed. A knife from within. "Someone's feeding them my moves. Yours now, too." Elena's grip tightened on the mug, hot ceramic grounding her. Loyalty versus fear, his world tempted with protection, but at what cost to her independence? The monitors beeped softly, a guard rotation alert he'd programmed himself, but the van paused, headlights dipping as if signaling. Outside, the wind howled, rattling a loose shutter, while inside, the first clues unraveled. A burner phone in Vincent's pocket buzzing once, unknown number, text unread. Was it Tommy's confession, or the serpent's next play? She met his eyes, the room's warmth a fragile bubble against the storm. "If we're in this, I need truth. All of it." Vincent's smile was grim, the scar on his jaw catching the light. "Truth's a debt, Elena, and tonight I've got one to you." But as the van's engine revved, peeling away into the snow, he wondered, could he shield them without claiming them? Or would the pull of found family bind them tighter than any chain? And what message waited on that phone, poised to shatter the fragile peace? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The burner phone vibrated again in Vincent's pocket, an insistent buzz that cut through the safe house's quiet like a suppressed gunshot. He fished it out, the screen's blue glow casting harsh shadows across his face as Elena watched from the cot, Marco's small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm beside her. The text was simple, stark. Russo, you can't run forever. East Side owns the docks tonight. Hand over the ledger, or the kid pays. No sender, but the phrasing reeked of Tommy, too familiar, laced with that old bravado from their street days. Vincent's thumb hovered, then deleted it, but the damage lingered. A digital breadcrumb leading straight to the heart of the rot. Elena set her mug down, the ceramic clinking softly on the side table stocked with protein bars and spare ammo clips. What does it say? Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked to the monitors, where the street feed showed fresh tire tracks vanishing into the snow. The safe house felt smaller now, its brick walls closing in like a vault with no exit. She'd patched Marco's clothes with a spare blanket, the fabric rough against his fever-flushed skin. But the antibiotics were a slow burn, hours before any real fight against the infection. Invitation to fold, Vincent replied, pocketing the phone. He crossed to the kitchenette, pulling a ledger from a hidden drawer beneath the sink. Leather-bound, its pages filled with coded entries, shipment dates, guard rotations, payoffs to city officials. Tommy's hand, no doubt. The numbers matched the manifest Vincent had trusted him with. My second-in-command's playing both sides. Sold the convoy route for a cut of the East Side's territory. Christmas bonus, I guess. His tone was dry, but underneath simmered the code he'd lived by. Loyalty earned through blood, not broken for greed. Losing his son had carved that deeper, a vow to shield the vulnerable from the machine he'd built. She stood, tucking the blanket around Marco, her movements fluid despite the exhaustion etching lines under her eyes. The air carried the bitter edge of cooling coffee mixed with the faint ozone hum of the monitors, their feeds cycling through alley cams and a distant warehouse overlook. And us? We're just collateral in your ledger? Autonomy clashed in her chest, gratitude for the rescue warring with the fear of becoming a line item, traded like the cans in the pantry. She'd clawed her way through evictions and dead-end shifts, Marco her anchor, not some magnate's shield. Vincent turned, meeting her gaze, the scar on his jaw tightening as he clenched it. Possessiveness stirred, not as ownership but as a fierce claim on what he'd glimpsed in her by the river. Unyielding fight, the kind that mirrored his own buried losses. You're not in it yet, but ignoring this pulls you deeper. He flipped open the ledger, tracing a finger over an entry dated 2 days prior. A payment to a ghost driver for East Side access, plate number matching the van's partial read. Subtle tell, Tommy's sloppiness, or a deliberate leak to force Vincent's hand. The docks loomed in his mind. Those concrete veins where shipments of holiday imports hid darker cargo. Weapons, laundered cash, rival stashes ripe for the taking. A low beep from the console interrupted, the guard rotation alert flashing red. Outside, the snow had thickened, blanketing the street in white silence, but the feed caught movement. A figure in a hooded parka lingering at the corner bodega, burner in hand, dialing, not random. The posture screamed scout, eyes darting to the safe house's facade. Vincent's pulse quickened. Institutional limits meant no immediate cops on Christmas, but his rivals thrived in the gaps. We move. Now. East Side's pushing for the ledger. It's got codes to their operations. If they get it, the whole balance tips. Elena glanced at Marco, his coughs ragged but spaced. The fever's grip loosening just enough to buy time. He's not ready for another tunnel crawl, and I don't run blind. Fear versus trust. Her ethics demanded she protect her son first, not dive into a stranger's war. But the river's chill still haunted her bones, Vincent's pull a reluctant lifeline in the storm. He nodded, grabbing a go-bag from the closet. Meds, cash, a spare pistol holstered low. There's a clinic 2 miles out, private. My doc owes me. We take the back alley, circle to the pier. My contact there runs diversions, stage blackout if needed. The plan unspooled in his head, grounded in logistics. The pier's loading cranes for cover, a burner call to reroute any tails. No miracles, just the grind of surveillance counters, jamming signals with a pocket device. Reading behavioral tells like the scout's frozen stance. She scooped Marco up, his weight familiar and grounding, and followed Vincent to the rear door. The alley reeked of overflowing dumpsters, holiday wrappers fluttering like confetti in the wind, the sodium lights buzzing overhead on wet asphalt. Snow crunched underfoot as they slipped out, Vincent leading with the bag slung over his shoulder. The scout didn't spot them, too focused on his call. But as they rounded the cannery's edge, distant headlights pierced the flurry. Another van, slower this time, its wipers slashing rhythmically. Vincent pulled her into the shadow of a rusted shipping container, the metal cold against her back. Marco stirred, murmuring in his sleep, and Elena hushed him, her heart pounding. The vehicle paused at the intersection, engine idling like a predator's breath. Through the snow, she glimpsed the plate. Ends in 47. Tommy's mark again. "He's close," Vincent whispered, his breath fogging the air. Feeding them real time. The van lurched forward, tires spinning briefly on ice before gaining traction, heading their way. Vincent's hand brushed her arm, guiding, not grabbing, and they darted toward the pier, the river's metallic tang sharpening as they neared. Cranes loomed like skeletal guardians, chains swaying with a low clink, the water below a black mirror under the storm. But as they ducked behind a stack of pallets, a new sound cut through. The crackle of a radio from the van, voices barking coordinates. Partial discovery hit. Tommy's betrayal wasn't just routes. He'd compromised the safe house cams, turning Vincent's eyes against him. Elena pressed against the wood, Marco's warmth her anchor. What now? We can't outrun this forever. Vincent scanned the darkness, spotting a docked trawler with dim running lights, his contact signal. We don't run, we flip it. But as the van's beams swept closer, illuminating the pier's slick planks, he pulled out the burner, thumbing a quick text to his loyal remnant. "Docks, now, bring the intercept." The response buzzed back. En route, 10 minutes in a tightening noose, enough time for extraction, or for the serpents to strike first. And in the glare, Elena caught a glint on the van side. That coiled serpent insignia, real and closing in. Was Tommy watching from afar, or had he sold them all for a seat at the rival table? The pier stretched like a forgotten spine into the river's maw, its weathered planks groaning under the weight of accumulated ice and neglect. Snowflakes swirled in chaotic eddies, caught in the beams of the approaching van, which crawled forward with predatory caution, its tires hissing on the slick surface. Vincent pressed Elena deeper into the shadow of the pallet stack, the rough wood splintering slightly under his palm, releasing a faint, briny scent of old fish and tar. Marco's shallow breaths warmed her neck, a fragile rhythm against the night's cacophony, the low slap of waves against pilings, the distant clank of buoys marking the channel like muffled alarms. "Stay down," Vincent murmured, his voice a thread of gravel amid the wind's howl. He peered through a gap in the crates, eyes narrowing on the van's silhouette. The serpent insignia gleamed wetly on the door, a coiled threat uncoiling in real time. 10 minutes until his intercept, loyal remnants from the outer docks, driving a nondescript rig with reinforced plating and a driver who owed him for pulling his brother from a botched heist years back. But 10 minutes was an eternity when Tails had your scent. Human error in the snow could turn a clean getaway into a slaughter. Elena shifted Marco's weight, her arms aching from the cold's insidious bite, seeping through her coat like doubt. The antibiotics were working, his fever dipping just enough to keep delirium at bay, but the pier's chill threatened to undo it all. "This intercept, reliable?" she whispered, her gaze flicking to the trawler bobbing 50 yards out, its running lights a hazy beacon through the flurry. Trust versus suspicion clawed at her. Vincent's world promised sanctuary, but at the cost of her hard-won edges, the independence that had kept her and Marco alive through evictions and empty shifts. He nodded once, sharp. Loyalty's my code. Doesn't bend for holidays or payoffs. The words carried the weight of his past, the son's grave a silent vow etched into every decision. But possessiveness flickered in his chest, unbidden. Elena's defiance by the river had hooked him, a mirror to the family he'd lost, pulling him to shield her not as property, but as a piece of redemption. Yet her autonomy pushed back, a boundary he respected even as it chafed. Tommy's the weak link. That plate, 47, it's his signature on every ledger I've seen. He's not just leaking roots, he's directing the hunt. The van halted 20 feet away, engine idling with a throaty rumble that vibrated through the planks. Doors creaked open, and two figures emerged, hooded against the storm, flashlights stabbing the darkness like accusations. One swept the beam across the pallets, the light grazing the edge of their hiding spot, illuminating frost-laced chains dangling from a nearby crane. Vincent's hand hovered near his pistol, but he held. Firing now would summon the whole nest. Instead, he pulled a small jammer from his pocket, a black market gadget humming faintly as it disrupted nearby signals. No cell pings, no GPS locks, just the raw logistics of evasion, buying seconds in a game of shadows. Elena's pulse thundered, the metallic tang of the river sharpening with her fear. Marco stirred, a soft whimper escaping, and she clamped a hand over his mouth gently, her other arm steel around him. If we bolt for the boat, they'll see us. Prudence versus ambition. Hers screamed to hunker down, wait out the storm. But Vincent's pull dragged her toward the fray, testing the fragile bond forming in the chaos. Distraction first, he replied, eyes on the figures. One pulled a radio, static crackling before the jammer cut it mid-word. Behavioral tell. The man's posture stiffened, glancing at his partner with a curse lost to the wind. They split, one circling left toward the crane, the other probing the water's edge. Vincent seized the gap, whispering, "On 3, low and fast." He counted down, then they burst from cover, feet pounding the slick wood in a desperate sprint. Snow muffled their steps, but the crane-side figure spun, flashlight beam whipping toward them. "Over there!" The shout pierced the gale, boots thudding in pursuit. Elena's lungs burned, Marco bouncing against her as she ran, the trawler's deck a tantalizing promise. Vincent flanked her, shoving a loose pallet into the path behind. The wood toppled with a crash, splintering under the chaser's weight, buying precious yards. The river's edge loomed, black water churning below, and they leaped the gap to the trawler's gangway, the metal ramp rattling like bones. Vincent hauled her aboard first, then cut the line with a pocket knife, the rope fraying with a wet snap. The engine coughed to life under his hands, prepped by the contact, keys stashed in a hatch. As the boat lurched from the dock, propellers churning foam, the pursuers fired wildly, bullets pinging off the hull's rusted steel. No hits, just sparks in the snow. Amateurs rushing the shot, their aim fouled by the storm's veil. Elena collapsed against the cabin wall, the interior a cramped haven of diesel fumes and salt-crusted nets, a single bulb swinging overhead. Marco coughed, the sound wet but steadier as she rocked him. The trawler cut through the ice floes, the van's lights receding to pinpricks on the shore. "Clinic's upriver, private dock." Vincent called over the engine's roar, steering into the channel. His burner buzzed. "The intercept. Missed you at pier. Tails rerouted. Tommy's van flipped on ice. Coordinates for safe extract." Partial victory, but the ledger burned in his mind. Tommy's greed had tipped the scales, exposing fractures in the empire. She met his eyes across the dim cabin, the boat's sway mirroring her inner turmoil. Loyalty demanded she see this through, but fear whispered of deeper entanglements. Her life no longer just hers. Flipped van. End of it. Vincent's grip tightened on the wheel, the river's current pulling them toward the city's glowing veins. Doubt it. Snakes like him slither back. But as a new light flickered in the distance, Not headlights, but the erratic pulse of a warehouse floodlight, perhaps a staged diversion or worse. He wondered. Had Tommy anticipated the flip, planting a trap upriver? And with Elena and the boy now woven into his code, could he sever the betrayal without costing them all? The trawler's engine throbbed like a strained heartbeat, propelling them upriver through the narrow channel where ice chunks scraped the hull with insistent scratches. The warehouse floodlight pulsed erratically ahead, its beam slicing through the snow like a faulty interrogation lamp, casting the water in stark, alternating shadows. Vincent throttled down slightly, the diesel fumes thickening inside the cabin, mingling with the salty bite of the river and the faint, medicinal whiff from Marco's blanket. Elena leaned against the bulkhead, her arms a protective cage around her son, his coughs now interspersed with deeper, exhausted sighs. The fever had ebbed enough for his eyes to flutter open briefly, glassy but aware, fixing on her with a trust that twisted her gut. "Almost there," Vincent said over his shoulder, his voice cutting the cabin's hum. The wheel vibrated under his hands, steadying the boat against the current's pull. The clinic's private dock was a concealed notch in the industrial sprawl, tucked behind a row of derelict silos that masked it from main shipping lanes. No frills. Just a weathered ramp leading to a back entrance, guarded by a doc who'd patched more bullet holes than fevers in his career. Vincent's code demanded he deliver them there, intact. Letting innocents like Elena and Marco fracture under his world's weight would echo the loss that still haunted his nights. But the light's flicker gnawed at him, too rhythmic, like a signal, not a short. Elena peered through the salt-streaked porthole, the city's underbelly unfolding. Towering cranes dormant for the holiday, their cables swaying like nooses in the wind, and distant warehouses hulking under sodium glows that turned the snow to ash. That light. It's watching us. Suspicion laced her words, her independence flaring against the vulnerability of reliance. She'd glimpsed enough of Vincent's life to know safety was a ledger entry, balanced against debts she couldn't afford. Gratitude for the river rescue pulled her closer, but autonomy screamed to grab Marco and vanish at the first clear shore. Ethics be damned if it meant freedom from the serpent's shadow. He nodded, eyes scanning the banks. Staged, probably. Tommy's style. Diversions to flush us out. The betrayal stung deeper now. A personal fracture in the empire he'd built on vows. Protect the family, restrain the power with rules like never touching kids or the desperate. Tommy had been there from the start, sharing smokes in back alleys, but greed had eroded that bond, turning ledgers into weapons. Vincent's burner stayed silent. No update from the intercept team, just the void of potential comms jam. Human error or deliberate. The river's chill amplified the isolation, waves lapping the hull like whispers of doubt. The floodlight intensified as they neared, sweeping the channel in wide arcs, illuminating flows that bobbed like decoys. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed from the left bank, a generator kicking in, followed by the grind of a loading door rolling up on a nearby warehouse. Figures emerged, silhouettes against the interior blaze, their movements too coordinated for squatters. Flashlights danced, one catching the trawler's outline, and a radio crackled faintly over the water. Boat inbound, Russo's rig, cut the lights on my mark. Vincent cursed under his breath, yanking the wheel hard. The trawler veered, engine roaring as it skimmed a sandbar, the hull shuddering with protest. Bullets whined past, plinking into the water like skipped stones gone lethal. Suppressed fire from the warehouse, aimed to disable, not kill outright. Rivals playing smart, herding them toward the open river where bigger fish waited. Elena ducked low, shielding Marco, her heart slamming against her ribs. The boy whimpered, clutching her coat, the warmth of his small body a stark contrast to the cabin's encroaching cold as wind whistled through a cracked seal. "Clinic's compromised," Vincent barked, scanning for an out. The private dock's ramp loomed empty now. No welcoming figure, just shadows that screamed ambush. Tommy's reach extended further than Roots. He'd flipped the dock's discretion for a payout, turning sanctuary into snare. Vincent's possessiveness surged, a raw urge to barricade Elena from this storm, but her glare met his. Fierce, unyielding, demanding partnership, not patronage. We hit the silos, use the cranes for cover. My team's rerouting, hold for extraction. She nodded grimly, strapping Marco tighter as the boat bucked. The river narrowed here, flanked by concrete barriers slick with ice, the air heavy with the acrid tang of rust and spilled oil from derelict tankers. Vincent gunned it toward the silos, their cylindrical forms rising like silent sentinels, ladders and catwalks offering precarious high ground. The warehouse figures mobilized, a speedboat detaching from a hidden slip with a throaty outboard growl, cutting the water in pursuit. Distance watchers on the bank, scouts with binoculars, no doubt feeding cords via unjammable landlines, exploiting the storm's cover. The trawler scraped against the silo dock, a jarring halt that sent tools clattering in the cabin. Vincent leaped out first, tying off hastily before helping Elena over the side. Her boots hit the frozen planks with a crack, Marco's weight pulling her off balance, but she steadied, the wind whipping her hair like a flag of defiance. Gunfire peppered the water behind them, the speedboat closing fast, its bow slicing foam. They scrambled up a maintenance ladder, the metal rungs groaning underfoot, ice crystals shattering like glass. At the top, a narrow catwalk spanned the silos, exposed but defensible, the floodlight now fixed on their position, blinding and relentless. Elena crouched behind a control box, the hum of its dormant gears vibrating through her knees, Marco buried in her lap. Extraction. How? Fear edged her voice, but so did resolve. Loyalty to her son meant facing this, even if Vincent's world tested every boundary. Below, the speedboat idled, engines cutting as 3 men disembarked, pistols drawn, their shouts muffled by the gale. Behavioral tells screamed setup. One hung back, radio to ear, coordinating. Tommy's hand, no doubt, his ambition overriding prudence. Vincent knelt beside her, pulling a flare from the go bag and igniting it with a hiss. The red bloom arced skyward, a signal for the intercept, cutting through the snow like a bloody promise. They'll come from the east tunnel. Underground access to the docks. We hold the catwalk, bottleneck them. His eyes locked on hers, the scar on his jaw stark in the flare's afterglow. The code bound him, protect, don't possess. But the pull toward her deepened. A found family emerging from the chaos. Loyalty outshining the Empire's tarnished gold. The men below advanced, boots crunching ice, but a distant rumble built. The intercept rig, barreling through a service tunnel mouth hidden by chain link. Headlights exploded from the darkness. The vehicle, a armored van with reinforced bumpers, ramming the speedboat's mooring, splintering wood and sending the pursuers scattering. Tires screeched on the bank, doors flying open as Vincent's loyalists poured out, returning fire in controlled bursts. The warehouse light stuttered, a staged blackout plunging the area into relative dark, generators whining in overload. Elena watched the fray below, bullets sparking off metal, the river churning with debris. Victory edged closer, but at cost. The lead loyalist took a graze to the shoulder, dropping with a grunt, blood staining the snow. Vincent's burner finally buzzed. Clearing the bank. Tommy's signal traced. Burner in the warehouse. We take him? The revelation hit. The true threat organized. Tommy holed up directing from afar, his betrayal a ledger of lies. As the intercept team closed the noose, Vincent pulled Elena toward the ladder, Marco secure. But in the blackout's gloom, a new shadow detached from the warehouse. A lone figure slipping toward a side door, briefcase in hand. The ledger? Or something worse? And if Tommy escaped with it, would the fragile trust they'd forged survive the serpent's final strike? The catwalk vibrated under their boots as the blackout swallowed the pier in inky chaos. The only light now the sporadic muzzle flashes from below. Pops of orange that lit the snow in fleeting bursts. Vincent's hand steadied Elena's elbow, guiding her down the ladder's rungs with urgent precision, the metal slick and treacherous under the melting ice. Marco clung to her neck, his small body a warm anchor amid the cold's vice, his coughs muffled against her shoulder. The air reeked of cordite and wet concrete, the river's briny undertow pulling at their senses like an invisible tide. "Down! Now!" Vincent urged, his voice low over the fray. The intercept team's van had plowed through the chain link, its reinforced grille crumpling the speedboat's hull into twisted metal, engines whining in protest. Shouts echoed from the bank, his loyalists barking orders, rivals scattering like rats under pressure. But that shadow from the warehouse gnawed at him. A lone figure, briefcase clutched like a talisman, slipping toward a service alley flanked by oil drums and rusted conveyor belts. Tommy's build, the slouch of a man who'd always favored flight over fight. The ledger, codes to shipments, payoffs, the fragile balance of territories, couldn't fall into serpent hands. Elena hit the dock first, her boots splashing in a shallow puddle that reflected the dying floodlight's stutter. She scanned the gloom, heart pounding with the push-pull of fear and resolve. Vincent's world had ensnared them, his protectiveness a double-edged blade that both shielded and confined. "That shadow, your Tommy?" she whispered, shifting Marco as they crouched behind a stack of mooring ropes, coarse fibers scratching her palms. Independence screamed to bolt for the nearest shore, ethics demanding she shield her son from this vortex. But loyalty to the man who'd pulled them from the river tethered her. Gratitude twisted into something deeper, a reluctant trust forged in the storm's crucible. Vincent nodded, eyes locked on the alley's mouth where the figure paused, glancing back with the paranoia of the cornered. Behavioral tell. The way he favored his left side. An old knee injury from a warehouse brawl Vincent remembered patching himself. He's got the book. If he slips it to the east side, my code crumbles. Innocents like you get caught in the crossfire. His past loss echoed in the words. The son's grave a vow that restrained his empire's reach. Power for protection, not plunder. But possessiveness stirred, unyielding. Elena's fire had reignited it, making her and Marco more than debts. They were the family he'd reclaim, if the night didn't claim them first. A loyalist radio crackled nearby, static-laced. "Alley's clear, suspect heading north, toward the tunnel grate. We box him?" Vincent snatched the device, thumbing it. "No shots. Alive. He talks, or the serpents do." The team fanned out, boots crunching snow as they flanked the alley, using the silo's shadows for cover. No high-tech miracles, just coordinated rotations, reading the terrain. The alley's dead end at a storm drain, chained but pickable, a smuggler's escape. Vincent's father had mapped decades ago. Human error had betrayed him once. Now, prudence would reclaim the edge. Elena followed as Vincent led the creep forward, the group a silent phalanx weaving through debris. Overturned pallets, chains snaking like veins across the frozen ground. The warehouse loomed to their right, its loading door jammed half open from the ruckus, spilling faint emergency light that painted the snow in crimson hues. Marco whimpered softly, the chill aggravating his cough, and Elena dosed him another drop from the vial, her hands trembling but precise. The antibiotic's slow work bought time, but the environment turned hazardous. A sudden gust whipped up, scattering loose gravel that skittered like warnings, nearly masking the figure's labored breaths ahead. They closed the gap at the tunnel grate, where Tommy knelt, fumbling with bolt cutters scavenged from a nearby toolbox. The briefcase lay open beside him, pages fluttering in the wind, ledgers exposed, entries in his scrawled code, dates for East Side drops, guard shifts flipped for payoffs. Vincent lunged from the shadows, tackling him to the icy asphalt with a thud that expelled the air from Tommy's lungs. "You sold us for scraps?" Vincent growled, pinning him, knee to the traitor's back. The loyalists encircled, pistols low but ready, the river's hum underscoring the tension. Tommy wheezed, face pressed to the snow, his hood fallen to reveal sweat-slicked hair and eyes wide with cornered defiance. Russo. East Side offered real power. Your code's a chain, holding us back while they expand. Ambition versus prudence. His words dripped resentment, old grievances resurfacing from years of Vincent's restrained hand. No innocents harmed, shipments clean, rules that chafed Tommy's greed, especially after the son's death tightened the reins. Elena hovered at the edge, Marco's weight grounding her, watching the confrontation unfold. The revelation hit, the threat organized, Tommy's betrayal the linchpin, feeding rivals intel via discreet burners and compromised manifests. Victory loomed, but at cost. A loyalist nearby clutched his grazed shoulder, blood seeping through his coat. The wound a stark reminder of the night's toll. Vincent zip-tied Tommy's wrists, hauling him up roughly, the ledger snatched and tucked into his coat. You talk. All contacts, all drops, or the code bends, for you. Tommy's laugh was bitter, cut short by a cough mirroring Marco's. Too late. Serpents know the safe house grid. They're coming for your family now. The words landed like ice shards, surveillance threads unraveling further. He'd leaked the brownstone's cams, turning Vincent's eyes into liabilities. Elena's gaze met Vincent's, the push of autonomy clashing with the pull of shared peril. Trust tested, but holding. As the team bundled Tommy toward the van, sirens wailed distantly, institutional limits cracking under holiday strain. Vincent guided Elena back to the trawler, now guarded by two loyalists, the engine idling low. But in the alley's gloom, a faint glint caught her eye. A discarded burner phone, screen cracked but alive, buzzing with an incoming call. Unread message. Ledger secured. Extraction at dawn. Warehouse 7. Tommy's lifeline, or a deeper serpent. And with the betrayal exposed, could Vincent's code shield their fragile bond from the rival's dawn raid, or would exposure claim the found family before it fully formed? The discarded burner phone lay in the snow like a venomous relic, its cracked screen glowing faintly with the unread message. Ledger secured. Extraction at dawn. Warehouse 7. Vincent snatched it up, the cold plastic biting his gloved fingers. As the team bundled Tommy into the armored van's rear, zip ties creaking against his struggles. The river's current tugged at the trawler's hull, a relentless murmur underscoring the night's unraveling threads. Elena stood close, Marco's head heavy on her shoulder, the boy's coughs now a steady rasp softened by the antibiotics' gradual hold. The air hung thick with diesel exhaust from the idling van, and the sharp ozone tang of spent gunfire, the snow muffling the distant sirens like a conspirator's hush. Vincent's jaw tightened, the scar along it pulling taut in the emergency light's red wash. Warehouse 7, his own territory, a cavernous relic on the industrial fringe where shipments vanished into ledgers like ghosts. Tommy's betrayal had mapped it as the drop point, a final handoff to the serpents before dawn cracked the sky. He's bait, Vincent said, voice low and edged, pocketing the phone, luring us to finish what he started. But if we let it slide, the East Side rolls in unchecked. Your clinic runs, Elena, the diner's routes, all fair game. His code demanded closure. Restrain the power. Protect the innocents, even if it meant diving back into the storm's maw. Elena met his gaze, the wind whipping loose strands of her hair across her face, carrying the faint, briny chill from the water. Loyalty versus fear churned in her chest. Vincent's world had already cost her a night's peace, exposure threading through every shadow. Yet the river's rescue lingered, his unyielding grip a promise amid the chaos, pulling her toward a bond that tested her autonomy. And if we go, Marco needs rest, not more running. But Marco stirred, his small hand clutching her coat, eyes half open in the dim light, and she saw the parallel. Survival's code, mothers or magnates, bound them in the push-pull of necessity. We end it clean, Vincent replied, signaling the driver. Team hits the warehouse perimeter, cameras looped, Guards rotated out for holiday shift. You and the boy stay in the van, extraction ready. No easy outs. The plan hinged on logistics. The van's reinforced plating for cover, loyalists using shipping manifests to predict Serpent arrivals. Dawn meant a convoy from the East Docks, plates ending in 13, a tell from Tommy's sloppy codes. The group piled in, the engine growling to life, tires churning slush as they peeled from the pier. Inside, the heater blasted stale warmth, mingling with the metallic scent of blood from the wounded loyalist's bandage, his graze a throbbing reminder of costs already paid. The drive blurred the city into a white-veiled smear. Overpasses strung with faded Christmas lights flickering like dying stars. Warehouse 7 loomed on the outskirts, a behemoth of corrugated steel and loading bays, its silhouette jagged against the pre-dawn gloom. Sodium lamps buzzed overhead, casting wet asphalt in jaundiced pools, the air heavy with the low hum of generators and the distant rumble of freight trains on parallel tracks. Vincent's team fanned out on foot, shadows merging with stacked containers, their radios whispering coordinates. Perimeter clear, East convoy inbound, 3 vehicles, armed escorts. Tommy slumped in the back, gagged now, his eyes darting with the fear of a man who'd bet wrong on ambition. Elena watched from the van's tinted window, Marco dozing fitfully on the bench seat, a spare blanket cocooning him. The warehouse's side door creaked open in the feed from a loyalist's body cam, looped footage of empty bays masking their infiltration. But tension coiled. A partial discovery hit when Vincent's voice crackled over the comms. Burner trace, Serpent Lieutenant inside, waiting the ledger. Tommy flipped manifests. They've got access codes for the East Tunnel. Betrayal's web deepened. Institutional limits exposed. No cops stirring on Christmas remnants, leaving the void for rivals to fill. Inside, the warehouse echoed with the drip of melting ice from rafters, the floor a labyrinth of crates stamped with faded import seals. Vincent moved like a specter, pistol low, the air thick with the musty scent of stored tarps and oiled machinery. The lieutenant paced near a loading conveyor, briefcase in hand, empty, a decoy for the real exchange. Behavioral tell, his fidgety glances at a wall clock, synced to the convoy's ETA. Vincent signaled, and the team struck, lights jammed with a pocket EMP, plunging the space into blackout, emergency reds pulsing like wounds. Shouts erupted, scuffles in the dark. A loyalist tackled an escort, the thud of bodies on concrete, grunts over the clatter of spilled tools. Vincent cornered the lieutenant against a rusted forklift, the man's radio spitting static before going dead. "Where's the dawn drop?" Vincent demanded, voice a controlled thunder. The Serpent spat defiance, but the code held. No graphic end, just pressure. Loyalists securing the perimeter. The convoy's headlights now visible through frosted windows, screeching to a halt outside. Tires spun on ice, doors slamming, but the team had jammed the bay doors with chains, turning the warehouse into a bottleneck. Gunfire rattled. Muffled pops from the entrance, bullets ricocheting off steel beams, one grazing a loyalist's leg, dropping him with a hiss of pain. Elena tensed in the van as comms fed the chaos. Convoy pinned, Serpents calling retreat. The risk peaked, environment hazardous. A stage spark from a downed lantern ignited a pallet stack, flames licking upward in orange tongues, smoke billowing acrid and thick. Vincent emerged coughing, dragging the lieutenant zip-tied, the briefcase yielding a secondary ledger. Serpent routes. Payoffs mirroring Tommy's. The true revelation crashed down. The threat organized. A rival faction's bid for Chicago's veins. Tommy the linchpin sacrificing for a throne that crumbled. Victory came costly. The wounded loyalist limped out, exposure risking a dawn sweep by any overlooked eyes, the fire's glow summoning distant sirens. As the team extracted, piling into vehicles amid the blaze's roar, Vincent slid into the van beside Elena. Flames reflected in his eyes, weary but resolute. It's done. Serpents scatter, ledgers burned, contacts rolled up. He glanced at Marco, then her, the possessiveness softening to commitment. You fought like hell back there. Stay with me. Not as debt, but family. My code covers you both now. The words sealed it, a pledge grounded in the knight's forge, protection earned, a future sketched in safe houses and quiet codes, her independence woven into his restrained power. The van cut through the snow toward a new safe house, the warehouse fire a fading pyre on the horizon. Elena leaned into the seat, Marco's steady breaths a balm, the adventure's scars, betrayals exposed, loyalties tested, outlasting the spoils. What remained was transformation. Memory of the river's chill. The pull of found family stronger than any empire's gold. In the quiet, Vincent's hand brushed hers. A silent vow amid the hum of tires on salted roads. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.